Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under, our last episode for the season. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, doing really well. It's nice to be talking about a new season with obviously the promotion and a lot to look forward to as we know that we're expecting a lot of things to happen between now and then. So it's all good news at the moment, and I guess we eagerly await the preseason circus that is new signings and rumors and all the exciting stuff that comes with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I mean, we've had some good news already with a signing and a re-signing as well. But before we get into, I guess, the current news and then also looking ahead to the championship season, we will just take a look back at the season that was. We'll wrap up with our young player of the season, best signing of the season, biggest surprise packet, I guess, in terms of players of the season. And then we have been doing our votes through the weeks this season, giving a 3-2-1 for players for performances. So we will unveil the winner of that award as well. But Logan, look, I guess if we wanted to start with best young player of the season, who would you give that to?
What an incredibly hot, contested field that really is. When you look at the average kind of age of our squad, and you consider all the names that kind of threw themselves into the equation, I think that, I mean, when we consider young players, I assume we're talking from 23 years old and under.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because if we're talking about that, then you've got to consider Malik Wilkes. You have to consider Josh Emmanuel. You have to consider Alfie Jones. You have to think about Greg Dougherty. It's just the list kind of goes on with those young players. But it's really hard to go past Kane Lewis-Potter for his goal return, and I guess being a hometown boy, that makes it somewhat a little bit biased in factoring. I think everybody wants KLP to do well, and I think this season was really the kind of the becoming of a man for him in the sense that he had such an influential presence and really kind of developed into the player that we hoped he would be. And we saw glimpses of it in the previous championship season, but I think that across the board from start to finish, it's really hard to go past him. He had an excellent season.
Yeah, look, a terrific season for him. And he's performing at a level where you just sort of came to expect that from him. And I think that's the biggest compliment you can pay him, that it was just expected week in, week out, and he kept delivering for us. And, we sort of talked probably at the halfway point of the season about favorite goal of the season and that sort of thing. And I can't go past that goal he scored against, I think it was Swindon in the game we lost, where he sort of picked the ball up from about halfway and just kind of kept going with it and fired at home. But look, a terrific season for him. It was great to see him establish himself in the first 11 after sort of being a bit part player last season, and really looking forward to see what he can do in the championship next season. I'll probably, yep.
I was just going to say it feels like December was a kind of a distant memory when there was all that speculation about whether he was going to re-sign and whether he was out of favour with Mccann and not playing him because of they didn't want him to go past his contract term, and it was just all that drama seemed to, when we look at it in hindsight, it seemed quite irrelevant in the scheme of things, knowing how things panned out. So the fact that he was able to show the maturity of dealing with that situation and then have the second half of the season that he did have probably speaks into and makes an even stronger case for why he, is our young player of the season.
Yeah, and look, and that's a great word to use. I was about to say the same thing. I think the fact that he had that sort of contract drama during the season, but was able to overcome it and put the performances on the pitch, just showed a maturity and a level-headedness that you wouldn't normally expect of a guy of his age. It's easy to forget just how young he is, and what a fantastic season he put together. I guess for me, I mean, pretty similar sort of vein, going with a hometown boy. I've gone with Jacob Greaves, who broke into the side and was just, he displaced Reece Burke at the back, and really Burke never regained his spot in the side, and we'll talk a bit later about Burke's departure from the club. But Greaves has just had a tremendous season. We sort of hoped that after last season I think it was with Cheltenham Town, where he was on loan, that he would sort of come into the side and get a few appearances here and there, and I guess sort of similar to Lewis-Potter last season, start to sort of make those cameo appearances and kind of grow into the side. But look, he took his opportunity and just didn't look back. And talking about players just putting performances in, week out, I think Greaves was was tremendous for us. I think it's really unfortunate that he wasn't able to cap the season off with a goal. I know he's trying pretty hard to get it through the season, but he had that effort that Mcginnis ended up claiming. But look, I think he had a fantastic season. And as far as young players breaking into the side, I think between him and Lewis Potter, I think we're well stocked with homegrown talent at the moment.
Oh, certainly. And just even you mentioning Jacob Greaves, it kind of brings back some, fond memories of how we would have probably identified Reece Burke and Geordie Device as potentially our strengths in the beginning of this season, as having a really strong, centre back pairing. And ultimately, although Reece Burke did certainly play a far bigger role, it was Jacob Greaves and Alfie Jones who, ascertained the majority of that role throughout the season, and were probably, the most unexpected surprise packets in that sense, that they were our two best defenders, and they've proven it. And for that to be probably the most unexpected combination, if we had have talked about it in the preseason, it's a true testament to just how well they both played. But certainly gives you great grounds for Jacob Greaves taking that spot.
I guess the next award or next accomplishment we can talk about is best signing of the season. Did you have a player in mind for that one?
Huge. I think Greg Dougherty was a very, very strong signing just for what he did for our midfield. And I just thought the combination of him and Honeyman throughout the season was just exceptional. It was great to watch and really gave us that kind of guile and resolute, work rate that we needed in the midfield. And he just popped up and scored some really crucial goals. But again, I find myself in the conflict of Josh Emmanuel and Louis Coyle, because both of those guys were incredible signings. And we've talked at length about the split season where they almost kind of swapped roles, of being the key player in the team and starting right back. And to have both of them on the books is incredible, and really showed the people of Hull just how good both of them are. And having both of them join the squad was massive. I would probably say it's between those three, but incredible signings.
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, I'd probably agree that for me, Dougherty just edges it. And that's purely on the fact that Emmanuel and Coyle were fighting for that same spot, where if we'd only signed one of them, I think whichever one we'd signed would easily be signing of the season for me. But just the pure fact that they essentially split the season, by default, almost, I'd say I'd give it to Dougherty instead, because I think Dougherty complementing that midfield spot was just tremendous. I mean, I'm trying to think, really, you think back to last season and the players that we had in the midfield, and you're thinking of, Irvine and Stewart, Lopez. Honeyman was only really a bit part player. But I'm trying to think, we didn't really have a player of Dougherty's sort, just that sort of engine that he could just run box to box. Was great defensively, would sort of break down opposition attacks, recover the ball, but also really offensively minded as well, and really dangerous going forward. And I mean, I suppose in some ways the closest comparison I can think is Irvine. And Irvine, to me, just didn't have the same all-round game that the Dougherty's displayed this season. So I think, in a way, I mean, we've talked before about the fact that in some senses it feels like we've now got a stronger squad than last season. And Dougherty's one of those really big examples of it. I think I saw an article a few weeks ago where Dougherty actually said that even before we were relegated, I think Mccann had been sort of reaching out to him to see if he was sort of interested in coming across. So there was that interest level when we were in a championship level, let alone League One. So it sort of shows when Mccann viewed him and how much he rated him, that he was essentially in our plans as a championship club as well. So to get him in League One was a massive coup. I think there was a few championship clubs after him as well. And he's just had a fantastic season.
Yeah, I do actually remember the feeling of when Dougherty signed with us, and everyone was, somewhat bemused that he was willing to take that step down to League One, because I guess by all reports, as you mentioned, he is certainly a championship player and was probably considered by most people to view him of that being the league that he ought to be looking to play in. And so for him to take a arguable step down to League One and then I guess to take to it the way that he did, it probably feels very right that Greg Dougherty is going to be playing championship football this season. And the fact that not only has he now going to be playing championship football, but he is certainly an influential part of this squad, and it will be a familiar team with a year under or a season under his belt as that he hits the championship with, which I think will play into his favour. So really looking forward to seeing how he takes to the championship and what kind of role he plays, and just how much he can stand out and show us his stuff at a higher level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I guess moving on to biggest surprise packet of the season, or you could probably call this most improved player of the season, whether that's, from the start of this season to the end or from a previous season into this one. Who would you give this one to?
This one is a tough one, because I think George Honeyman was the ultimate player for City. I think that he's collected most of the awards, and we've talked about him week in, week out as well. But for me personally, this one has to go to Josh Mcginnis, and it's purely because I am still in disbelief at the influence that he had on the not only on the score sheet and the role that he had with his assists and his return, but he just really emerged as somewhat of the pivotal leader or seeming pivotal leader in the squad. I know that Mccann viewed him extremely highly, but his influence behind closed doors and what he means to the playing group seems to be really obvious. And him to kind of, as I said, surpass all my expectations of him as far as what I expected on the field, but also to see the role and how he was viewed by the playing group. It really surprised me, and I was delighted to see the way that that he was celebrated, particularly as we got promotion and went up as champions. And he had such a large role to play in that. And I just would not have expected that from the season before, when he was a role player at best. And when he did come on for us, I always used to kind of shake my head and think, what an awful move. And
I think probably he almost had more red cards than goals last season.
That's absolutely. And it was being used in sporadic bursts, and it just you never got filled with confidence when you saw Mcginnis get subbed on that something was going to happen. And, that was the complete opposite to how he was this season. And so, between Honeyman becoming the Iniesta of the championship and Josh Mcginnis, it would have to be between those two, but I would personally give it to Mcginnis.
Yeah, and look, and also when you consider the fact that he had COVID during the season, and as an asthmatic, that would I can't remember the amount of weight that he lost, but it was a significant amount. So the fact that he was even able to get back on the pitch at any sort of level, and the contribution that he made in that second half of the season was tremendous. And look, I mean, he's not even a name that had sort of crossed my mind when I was thinking of this award, but you're absolutely right that compared to last season to this season, I think his role and his goal return was tremendous and a huge part of our promotion. I mean, towards the end of the season, there were games where he was the most reliable or the most in form of that front three and was scoring almost every week for us. So yeah, he had a tremendous season, and quite rightly, as you say, Honeyman as well, going from a pretty maligned sort of role in the side last season, where he was getting criticised quite a bit for his sort of, I mean, he was running around a lot without a whole lot of output, and he's really turned his game around this season, or sort of stepped up this season. So he's certainly another one that you can't really look past. Sort of a few honourable mentions I'd say as well. Matt Ingram sort of coming into the team as he was signed as sort of a second choice, just there to give Long a bit of competition. Not really much thought about him. I think from memory, he'd last played at league level for Wickham or someone, and had conceded a whole lot of goals. So he was pretty poorly thought of. Came into the side and really kind of grabbed onto the goalkeeping shirt with both hands, I guess you'd say. Then I guess the other one I'd say as well was Reagan Slater, who really kind of came into the team as probably the least impressive of the loanees, and sort of left the end of the season as almost the most sought after, that we're sort of thinking, if we can sign any of them on the permanent, we want Reagan Slater, because I guess after a couple of injuries in the side and he sort of got his chance to step into the midfield, he really proved his worth and really showed that a consistent run of games could really sort of give him that confidence and that ability in his game, and had a great end to the season.
He certainly did, and I was about to chime in before and have a guess at who I might have missed, and Matt Ingram was on my list of honourable mentions, but you've once again outdone me with Reagan Slater as well, and it feels like an obvious one now that you've mentioned it, but yeah,
I think I'd still say Mcginnis is the most improved or the biggest surprise though.
Certainly. And I guess if you go across the team and think about how long the League One season is and just how many games you actually play, you could make honourable cases for each one of those players. And I guess it's kind of what you look for the most. And I guess when you're thinking about up front, you think about goal return, that seems to be the statistic that stands out. But yeah, you mentioning Matt Ingram as well. There were some crucial saves that he made, and again, as you said, the story of his season was started behind Long, and really wasn't in the equation as someone who was going to have a role in the season, and he was outstanding. So I guess when we think about him now as well, I saw some rumblings on Twitter about, well, what do we do keeper-wise now? Is he the first choice heading into the championship, or when we talk about going out to sign another keeper, are we looking to kind of upgrade from him? And I think that's a really, really good question to ask, because Matt Ingram could well be a very, very good standard championship keeper.
Yeah. Look, it's going to be interesting. I think there's a few rumblings that there's a keeper potentially being signed this week or next. So keep an eye out on developments with that. But I guess the last and maybe the most significant award is Player of the Season. This is the one that we've given the votes for during the season. And we do have a scoreboard up. It's actually, there's a two-way tie for third place, which in itself shows sort of the even spread amongst a lot of the players. But there is one player who stands sort of head and shoulders above the rest, and he's wrapped up every other award associated with the club. So there was one more for him, and that's, of course, Player of the Season for the 2020-2021 season, George Honeyman, with 80 votes ahead of Wilkes, Lewis Potter and Dougherty. Probably looking at that list, those four players have arguably we sort of talked about them already in a couple of aspects, but they've had huge influences this season and terrific seasons for us, and are a large part in getting us promoted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if you flip it on its head, I know you never want to be negative, and it's hard to be critical of a championship season where we did get promoted and finish first. But you go across the team from throughout the entire lineup, and it's really hard to fault anyone. The player that I'm probably most upset with, as far as underwhelmed, maybe was Richie Smallwood. But outside of that,
Eves maybe.
Eves as well. I think, there's potential for Eves to, he could have certainly got a better chance in as far as his goal return and what he actually did for the squad. But I mean, to be fair to Tom Eves, there was a lot of times where he was just being kept out because of the quality that was being shown by the other people in the front three. It's really hard to make way for a player of Tom Eves' caliber when all those three, KLP, Wilkes and Mcginnis, were all firing. So he was rightfully kept out of the squad, and I know that he gets referred to as a donkey, and is not always I guess fondly referred to when you see some of the decisions that he's made in front of goal. But I still always think that when Tom Eves is on the field, he does offer something different, and I think that's worth considering across the run of 40 plus games in a season. He absolutely has his role to play, but somewhat underwhelming. But outside of that, Alex, it was such an impressive season for nearly everybody in that squad, and fair play to them.
Yes, and speaking of, so we'll start with the positive transfer news first, and huge news yesterday with Alfie Jones re-signing for a further 2 years with an option of a third year in the club's favour. Sort of amazing and big news, just because of the rarity of getting a player to re-sign on those sorts of terms. Really great to see, and you hope it sort of strikes a chord or sort of sets a tone for the summer, and we can see a few more players perhaps sign on for longer term deals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's nice to see some early business, and I think it speaks into the feeling of the camp. It's when you go up champions and have such a seemingly good feel and run of momentum, then it does make sense to sign for the club, and to have such a young squad as well heading into the championship, to to be able to tie them down on some of these longer deals, it does mean long term, if the owners have a good model, depending on who the owners are, these are the types of players that if they do get sold in the next couple of years and do well for the club, well, then you're talking about some big money returns, and obviously that speaks to the financial strength. So I do like the model that I think we've gone down and done it right, and the fact now that you join that with the fact that the players actually do want to be there, and there's a seemingly good club culture again, which was something that you could certainly make a case for was lost after the previous relegation season. We hope that it does mean that more people will be happy to re-sign, and that there is a little bit more stability in the management and contracts that are offered, as opposed to what we saw the previous season, when you saw the likes of Jackson Irvine and
Lehigh and
the host of players that went out the door for almost nothing, and all spoke really poorly of how they were treated by the club. And it seems like that is, at least for now, is something that's been rectified. And that's a very pleasing thing, and something that as City fans we can be optimistic about.
Well, I mean, you talked there about stability with the club, and I was thinking about the fact that heading into this season, it's the third season for Mccann in charge. I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I know Adkins had, was it a season and a half?
Yeah,
something like that. So Mccann, coming into his third season, is our longest serving manager since Bruce, which in itself is actually commendable to have that sort of stability in the club. And I think with Burke's departure, which we'll talk about in a second, I think every player now at the club was signed by Mccann, which is pretty incredible in terms of notwithstanding the academy players, of course, but it's pretty incredible the turnover in the 2 years. But at the same time, it also now means we've got a squad that's entirely sort of identified by this manager. It's the players that he wants in the club. They've all come to the club wanting to play for him. So it's not as if they've signed for a different manager who's then left. There's that sort of sense of stability now, and hopefully that means that the players are much more comfortable being here. They know each other, they know the style, they know the club, and it's good signs for the future.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, I know we were talking about players of the season and the most unlikely signing or positive signing. I think that Grant Mccann is another unlikely hero from the story, in the sense that the fact that he was kept around, I think, was a surprise to us all. And we've talked at length about him saying, judge me at the end of next season, and now we have judged him as a League One championship winner. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how we view him in 12 months, and see if, like you said, with his own playing group, what is he capable of? This will be the true test of Grant Mccann's ceiling. Like, how good is he, and what is he going to mean to the city of Hull in a few years' time, when we look back on his time in charge at the club.
Absolutely. And we have had our first signing of the summer. We've had George Moncur sign essentially from Luton. I think he'd been released by Luton, so it was technically a free signing. But I mean, to me, I don't know a whole lot about him, to be perfectly honest, but from the sounds of things, it's sort of that Crowley sort of attacking midfielder role to sort of give depth in that position for Honeyman, but also sounds like he's quite comfortable playing across the front three. So in a way, it's almost replacing both the White and Crowley departures. Presumably, obviously, more players to come, but it's a good start. It's a player who is good on set pieces and offers a bit to the club.
And it's an early signing. I think that's one of the things that we haven't, become accustomed to seeing. And the fact that the club, again, maybe seems to be learning from previous eras to go out there and get some business done early, have a new face around the place, and be part of a group culture that is seemingly on the up. It's a great show of initiative. And as you said, I don't know too much about Moncur either, but the fact that he's signed, sealed, and at the club early doors, seemingly with a few others to come, and the re-signing of Alfie Jones, it shows that they're not resting on their laurels. They're looking to really shore up this championship squad early, and that's a positive step as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and so Reece Burke and George Long have left the club. Long has left for Millwall. Burke to Luton. So in a way, it's a sort of a swap deal, Burke for Moncur. What do you make of that? I mean, I think with Burke, it sounds like, I mean, partly it was a financial decision from our point of view. We wanted to re-sign him on cheaper terms, but also from his point of view, it sounds a bit like it was a family decision. I think it was Bristol City offered him better terms than Luton, but he turned those down to head to Luton. So it sounds like one of those ones that we probably couldn't do a whole lot about. And they both depart as pretty reasonable servants for the club. And yeah.
Yeah, Reece Burke had some great words to say. I read his kind of, farewell to the fans. And I think he's the type of player who, goes out the door with our best wishes. He certainly never did anything to kind of, upset the fans, and was always a really good servant for us, as you mentioned. So I think, yeah, as you said, it seems like that's what happens in football. Sometimes people have a different agenda and what some clubs offer and where they're located, and all those kind of factors do play into these decisions. And for Reece Burke, he seems quite happy to go. And, I think that we're not too happy to say goodbye to him, although, he leaves on positive terms. It's not, as we mentioned before, with Jacob Greaves and Alfie Jones re-signing, and obviously an area that we are strong in. I would expect us to go out and make some more additions to our defence. But we do wish Reece Burke well, and I don't think it's too much of a huge loss at this point.
Yeah, and I guess it's a bit of a shame with Long going as well. I still sort of think back to that game against Chelsea in the FA Cup where he looked a really quality keeper for us, and it was one of those games where you sort of looked at it and went, well, we're playing Premier League opposition, and he's sort of standing out. And at that point, you sort of think, well, maybe he's the sort of player that either will be with us in any sort of promotion push, or else will be sold on to a bigger club at some sort of profit. So it's a little bit of a shame to see him leaving on a free, having sort of fallen out of the side in the League One season. But, a promising keeper who again was, solid for us for at least the first half of that championship season. Sadly, sort of form fell away as it did with a lot of the players in the second half, and then sort of fell out of the side. So it's just, I think with keepers in particular, it's quite hard once you fall out of the side to get your place back.
Yeah, he certainly reminds me a lot, and shows parallels to David Marshall, when there was kind of that period where David Marshall came to us from Cardiff and was, he came with huge credentials, and we were really excited about that signing. And he was just awful to begin with, and then kind of earned his way back, and then kind of went off the boil again. And I mean, this was comparisons to Eldon Jakupovic as well, where they just go through their periods. And I think Long was exactly the same. As you mentioned, he showed some really promising glimpses of the keeper he could be. But, when Ingram got his chance, Ingram was outstanding and hasn't really put a foot wrong since. So, I don't think, by Long walking out the door, it's not a huge loss by any stretch of the imagination. And Millwall does seem like a good fit. So, again, not a bad person to lose, and we do wish him well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see in the coming weeks what further additions are made. On the ownership front, we it's almost like every year or two we get these sorts of rumors cropping up. This one, a little bit more substance in the sense I'd say this is the most credible rumor since those days on the promotion after Steve Bruce's departure, where we had those couple of pretty credible bids. It's gone a bit quiet lately, which I don't know if that means that stuff's actually happening behind the scenes, or it just means that the rumor's gone away. But I'm not quite trying to pronounce the name. Akun Ilikali, perhaps, Turkish businessman, TV mogul over in Turkey, big football supporter. So at least from the front of, or the position of wanting an owner who loves the game, who understands the game, and who appreciates the game, and potentially, therefore, by extension, the fans as well. It's a big tick in that box. Net wealth around about £100 million, rumored at least. So he's not a billionaire or an oligarch or anything like that, but he's also a pretty credible frontman for any sort of takeover bid. But yeah, I mean, there's not been a whole lot of chatter about it in the last week or so. So what do you make of it?
Yeah, hard to say. I think that when the sale of a club goes through, I don't think it's as simple as here's a package and here's the contract. Once you sign, it's yours type thing. I know that there's there's a lot to negotiate, particularly in the interest of Hull. When you think about the relationship with the council, and we've heard about how tricky some of the negotiations over the KCOM have been. So, with that in mind, I wouldn't expect a sale to go through quickly. And yeah, as you mentioned, it could be in the advanced stages. I think that for it to make the headlines and to be in the news as it was, then there's certainly some legs to it. And it's in the past we've been let down by some of these preemptive sales that are 100% going through, and you see Twitter start to light up, and then within hours it's dead. So I think we have to wait patiently with these things, and I think it'd be certainly welcome news if on the face value it is as good a proposition as it seems. But from I guess the standpoint of, it would immediately repair the barrier between some of the fans who are still choosing to stay away from the Tigers games because of the Allams being at the helm. So I mean, any change, at least initially, will be a good change. But as the credentials of Akun Alakawi, or however we do pronounce that name, we'll have to wait and see. I guess because we just have been promoted, and there's such an excitement around the club, I know personally it doesn't feel like it has the same urgency that it did at this time, last year. But again, it would be nice to see a change for the stay away fans, I guess.
Yeah, look, and it's a really interesting timing, as you say, because outside of the KLP contract negotiations, you could make a case that the Allams really haven't put a foot wrong this season. I mean, in saying that, it's very hard to put a foot wrong when the fans aren't in the stadium, and therefore you're not having to deal with ticket pricing or issues on the pavilions with the food, or gates being locked on the bridges, getting access to the ground, things like that. There's no sort of scope to piss the fans off in that sense. But it's been a positive season. It's a promotion season. You can make a case that now's a great time to cash in. You can also make a case that the Allams might look at it and say, maybe we can make a tilt for the Premier League. So, look, it's a tricky one. And I think I sort of looked at the period of time with the Allams taking over the club back in 2010, where I think it was first rumoured in the news in around October or September, and then the deal was signed off in December, so about 3 months later. And taking into account that at that time we were, sort of verging on administration, and therefore it was a very sort of urgent and rapid sale. This isn't that, the finance. I mean, you can look at it two ways, I guess. I mean, the finances are probably a lot cleaner now and a lot easier for due diligence and all that sort of assessment than it would have been back then. But at the same time, there's not that urgency for a sale that there would have been. So it could take longer. It could be quite quick, as we say. We just don't know. We just have to wait for that official club statement to announce anything happening.
And Alex, I dare say this, but is there a case for the Allams that they actually are great club owners when operating on a shoestring budget? Because they have proven, as being in charge when we're in the championship, that with the exception of last season, that they have made some, or at least the club has made some very astute purchases, and been financially viable for the last few years. I know that we've struggled when we've tried to take that extra step and consolidate in the Premier League. They certainly haven't always got behind the team with some of the signings that we would have hoped to have seen, but they've certainly been able to do a job in the championship, and we're definitely in League One. So I know that I want to be careful with how I word that, because it's a very controversial topic, but they have done some good things, and they've done some good things in recent times. For all the negative things they've done, it's hard to not say there's credit where credit's due in at least the last 12 months.
Yeah, I probably have to tread quite carefully as well, because I completely get where you're coming from. I think we've sort of said in the past, it's a very different perspective that we can offer as non-match day going fans on the impact of the Allams. And I think there's absolutely a case to be made that whether it's the membership scheme making people move seats, whether it's the ticket prices forcing juniors and concessions and elderly out, whether it's SM saying that the fans can die when they want and removing the name, and there's all sorts of things that are completely valid issues with the Allams. I do then look at some of the other clubs and say, for all the issues that we have with them, we still have our club. And you look at a Derby or a Sheffield Wednesday or a Bolton or a Bury, and you see these owners who, whilst being awful owners or irresponsible owners in some cases, like with Derby perhaps and Sheffield Wednesday, rather than awful, there's worse positions that clubs could be in. And I think it's a really difficult one because there's no sort of objective, what is a good owner, what is a bad owner. It's all about how does that owner impact on your ability to watch and enjoy football. And there'll be plenty of City supporters who'll say that these are bad owners and we need a change. And that's a completely valid viewpoint. So as you said, I think at the end of the day, new owners will give all the City supporters a chance to have a fresh page and get back to watching football and enjoy it. And if that's what's needed, that's what's needed. And I just have to hope that any new owner that comes in will be financially responsible. And I guess that's the main concern.
Yeah. And at least try to engage with the fans and have more of a cultural understanding of the city of Hull, like what football means to them and what it means to the fans. And I think that similar to when the Allams took over, because the club was in such a tricky predicament, the fans instantly took to the Allams and loved the fact that here was this family that kind of saved the club by all reports. And then obviously it's gone pear-shaped since then. But at least with the new relationship, then a lot of that stuff goes instantly. And all it takes is a quick look at at Blackpool as well, who have gone through a really tricky situation themselves. And with the change in ownership, fair play to them also finding a way to get promoted. And I guess just it's nice to see the excitement back at clubs like that that have done it so tough. And I guess we would experience our own romantic story if a new owner was to come in, and we will wait and see what happens with this speculative deal.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think that's a good chance. Let's just have a quick look ahead at the championship. We'll do a proper preview of the season, of course, probably 2 or 3 weeks out from the season beginning. But just at this sort of preliminary stage, fresh, optimistic, excited about being back in the championship. What is there a side that you're in particular looking forward to facing? Bigger clubs in the championship than League One? Is there anyone that you're particularly eyeing off a meeting with?
No, not really. I think that it's kind of like the excitement of just returning to the championship, where I feel is kind of our rightful league. I think it's probably the league that I don't think we really ever deserve to be out of it. If that's probably can't say that with a high level of entitlement, but it was a shock relegation when we did go down, and so to complete the task and be able to fly back into the equation in the championship, I'm just excited to be back there. I'm excited that it does mean some big trips, some big away days again. But no one in particular.
Doing our previews, and I think with all due respect to League One last season, when we were looking at the clubs we were facing, we didn't know a whole lot about them. It is refreshing being back in a league where we do have recent history and knowledge of a lot of these sides. There's not a particular side that stands out to me. I do look forward to playing, Sheffield United and West Brom and Fulham as the fallen Premier League clubs. I think that will always be fun just to sort of test ourselves against them. I guess Leeds isn't in the championship anymore, so there's not that sort of Yorkshire derby to look forward to. So, yeah, probably right. I think it's just going to be a great experience to be back amongst those big clubs. And, it does feel a bit entitled to say it, but it is sort of our rightful place or our sort of expected place in the league. I think the championship is just about our level. I think, in a perfect world, we'd be sort of a big championship club in the vein of, I guess what's a good example? Maybe like a QPR or someone like that, sort of mid to upper table in the championship, challenging for promotion rather than worrying too much about relegation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have a sense at this stage on where we'll finish? What's your sort of expectation for the season?
Well, look, I think last time I predicted playoffs, and I think that will be where we would kind of be aiming for. I would expect to be kind of nipping at the heels of a playoff place, or maybe mid-table. But I think that's probably where I would expect. I think that when you cast your eyes across the teams that are in the championship, I definitely think that we have a lot of talent in this squad and momentum, and momentum's a funny thing. So we get a pleasing start. There's no real saying as to how far we can go, but I'd expect to be somewhere between 6th and 10th.
Yeah, look, I think that's a pretty realistic or pretty accurate sort of assessment of the season ahead. I think if we can finish top half, that's a good season in my books. I think, any sort of sense of not having to look down the table, not having to worry too much about the drop zone. I think the squad, as we've said before, is arguably stronger than it was in the previous championship season, and really we should be looking up the table and what we can do. And I think, to be honest, with COVID and everything that's happened, I think there's a lot of vulnerable clubs in the championship, in the sense that I think having our finances in a good position, being able to retain the squad, being able to build and grow the squad, actually puts us in a really positive position compared to a lot of clubs, and gives us that opportunity to really have a cohesion that other clubs might be struggling without.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've only got to look at the form of particularly our front three, and they hit the season with incredible goal returns, and certainly for Kane Lewis-Potter and Malik Wilkes, they're the type of players who really have to be gunning for Premier League contracts, if not promotion with us. So I'm really excited to see just how far they can take their game, and test themselves against some of these bigger clubs.
No, absolutely. Well, it's all to look forward to. It's going to be very exciting next season. And of course, we will be back to preview and review each of City's games next season. We've got a few new interesting features that we're going to try out next season as well, just to keep everyone engaged and watching the podcast. But look, just before we go, just to be a little bit self-indulgent, I do keep track of our stats each and every season, and I wanted to highlight the fact that this has, excluding the first season where we only had the 6 episodes, this has been our most watched season to date, which is great to see. It's a great response and a great sort of following that we've built, and in this climate where there's so many other City podcasts as well, where we're not competing with each other, we're actually all growing and promoting each other's content, which is fantastic. It's great to see that sort of response from people still watching and following us along each season. So look, it's to have more than 4,000 views for the season as a whole, and to have that best average that we've had so far is a fantastic effort. So big thank you to all our listeners and watchers, and to yourself, Logan, as well, being a guest as always on the podcast.
It's always a good time to be talking about City, especially when we're winning. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Absolutely, no worries. Well, thank you for joining me for this one.
Mate, no problems at all, and look forward to being back on for the championship previews and getting excited about what's to come.
Absolutely, no worries. And look, thank you everyone for listening over the course of the season and listening on for this episode. As we said, we'll be back to preview the championship season in about a month's time after the Euros. Best wishes to England for the Euros for those listening from the UK. And until next time, come on.